right, we're going to go ahead and begin since we're a couple minutes behind our starting time. So if we could please have your attention up here. Our primary learning objective today to learn about the changes to mandated reporting procedures which affect us all. There are some significant changes that we all need to be aware of, and we will learn about those today. And we're going to have Alex come up first to talk to you about the December War lessons. Then we will be going into the mandated reporting update, and we'll talk briefly about the November 26th in-service so you know what's coming on that day. We'll do a quick scheduling committee update from the meeting we just had yesterday with the master scheduling committee from both sides of town, and do our share out at the end, and finally the SCAN meeting at the end of the meeting. So without further ado, Alex.
Okay, here's your spread for December. First one up there, 6th grade only. I included this in the email from last month, but just as kind of a reminder for you all, because of where your attitude lessons fall, you all will have an attitude lesson to start off. That's next Tuesday when we get back. The Tuesday we get back from Thanksgiving break. Then we have 5 lessons the rest of the month. Responsibility, checking the grades for 7th grade and then 6th and 8th grade. Respect up there. Together we succeed. This is a lesson we've done many times before with advisory and pride and whatnot. So you can see there in the folder what that one will look like. Organization, this one's on response inhibition. Again, we'll have 7th grade up first, then 6th and 8th grade. 6th grade will be linked directly to the assignment this month, so you can click on the link in the email. It'll take you right there. Attitude this month then is a respectful attitude, and then the last one we have is a responsibility lesson. I apologize that 6th and 8th grade you will be doing your responsibility lesson on 9th period before the holiday break. Do with that what you will, how you want to check the grades or what you want that to look like, but sorry that fell right there. The good news is that we will start back at the top with the responsibility lesson right after the new year, so that'll at least be good. We'll start at the top of the roar when we come back from the break. As always, please send me questions or comments. Getting some great feedback from people through the survey from last month, and just stop me in the hallway. So Mike, Chris, I really appreciate everything you're giving to us because we're going to use that to shape these for next year. So 6 lessons for 6th grade, 5 for 7th and 8th. That's your spread. So any questions, let me know.
Gracias, Alejandro. All right, so now we're going to hear from Marian Zimmerman. She's here from Children and Youth Services, and she's going to be updating us on some important changes that affect all of us in terms of reporting. So let's welcome Marian for joining us today.
Thank you. I brought my Bible, which is all the changes to the law. It's 76 pages, but I'm not going through all that with you today. So it's really, as far as mandated reporter goes, there's a few changes that are important that you know, so I wanted to make sure that I hit those. I wanted to leave time for questions because I'm sure you will have questions. And I will tell you that the new law goes into effect December 31st. We had some of our supervisors at our agency went to a training in June to talk about the changes. Had another group of supervisors go in September, and because of the questions that were asked in June, the training that was supposed to be the same in September was different. So while we think we know what the law says right now, it could change again before December 31st. Not necessarily for mandated reporting and what the requirements are for you. So that's, you actually have it kind of easy because it's pretty set in stone right now. The biggest changes will affect children and youth, how we do the investigations and all that kind of stuff. So one of the biggest changes that they made was who is a mandated reporter. When I did the training, and I was trained by Family Support Alliance, who is one of the 2 agencies that the Department of Public Welfare recognizes as certified to do the training. I took a very broad sense. You know, the official definition of a mandated reporter is anybody who, in the course of their occupation, employment, or practice of profession comes into contact with children, is a mandated reporter. So I pretty much said to people, if you work with kids in any way, you are a mandated reporter. One of the changes that will be effective December 31st is that if you volunteer, right now volunteers are not mandated reporters. They are to report to whoever's supervising them, but they are not mandated to make a call to Childline. Effective December 31st, volunteers will be mandated reporters. Anyone, and I wanted to reference it because it's pretty much everybody is going to be a mandated reporter now. I mean, they're really making it. If you supervise children in any way, if you're a church, if you have a church group that you lead kids, you're a mandated reporter. If you volunteer at the school, or if you are coaches, you're a mandated reporter. So they've really changed that a lot so that it's anybody that's coming in contact with children. One of the other big changes is, and I know that prior to this year, if you had a child disclosed to you, you would report to Pat Stevens, and then she would make that call. That's no longer the case. That actually was already changed. If you get a disclosure, or you think a child is, if you have reason to suspect a child is being abused, you must make the call yourself. That they used to call, when they passed that bill, they referred to it as the loophole. So that they made that whoever got the disclosure is responsible for making that call. It kind of makes sense to me because you're going to have the most detailed information about what was told to you. And you know how when someone tells you a story and you tell it to someone else and they tell it to someone else, till you get to that third or fourth person, the story could really change. And when we did investigations, sometimes what we got from Childline was really different than what when we did the investigation. It was different information. So it just makes sense if you get a disclosure or you have that suspicion, and you only have to have suspicion. You don't have to know. That's our job to do the investigations. They clearly say if you have reasonable cause to suspect, you must make that call. You still have to call Childline, and you're to call immediately. I know that for the schools that's difficult because if you're in the middle of class and you have a child come up to you, you got to get coverage for your class, and but if you wait till the end of the school day, I will tell you that I've gotten calls from Childline. It takes them up to an hour sometimes to get those calls to us. Now, with the way the changes are being made, hopefully they'll come in quicker. But Childline's getting them from all over the state. They have to figure out which county is going to do the investigation, so it can take up to an hour. I have tried to run to Phillipsburg to interview a child before they got on the school bus. It's very difficult to interview a child when you have 5 minutes till their bus is coming, and they're worried about whether or not they're going to make the bus. And it's also very difficult to interview a child in their home with their parents sitting there or sitting in the next room. We're not going to get anything from that child. If there truly is something going on, we're not going to get that information. I've done that. It's not easy. It's not good. And we really get one chance to get the truth, because the parents, we notify them, and of course they're right away talking to the kids about what did you say, what did you tell them, don't talk to them. I've had kids when I've gone into the school, I'd tell them who I was, where I was from, and I'd say, do you understand who children is, or do you know what I do? And, oh yeah, I'm not allowed to talk to you. Okay, well, and so I would kind of work around it and get them to talk, but it does make a difference. So if we have children that truly are being abused, and we know we do, we really need to make the best of that one shot that we get. So they're saying call Childline, call immediately. I don't know how you guys are going to do that, how you're going to, that's something internally you'll have to figure out. Since they took that loophole out, they did say that, once you call Childline, you can tell your designee or your administrator of the building that you made the call, because then that person is to help facilitate the investigation. So if we need to talk to the kids, I've gone in to interview one child, and maybe the child made a disclosure to another child, and that child told someone, and that's how we got the information. I will also need to talk to the child that made the original disclosure to that other person. So sometimes it's not just that one child that we're interviewing, it's several. If there's siblings, we may need to talk to all the siblings. So that's another one of the big changes. There is, for school teachers, you have to have 3 hours of training in abuse and neglect every 5 years. That's a new thing this year. There is an online training that the state just rolled out today, and I'm going to take it Thursday. So unfortunately, I got the email. I was in the office for about half an hour today, and I got the email while I was in there. And it will take you, they say to give yourself 3 hours to take it. I will tell you that I believe that is the one that the state kind of sent it out to some people to kind of review it and look at it to see if it made sense and if there was any issues. And when I did it, and I was looking for like typos and that type of thing, it took me 2 hours, and I kind of have been trained on all this. So, but you will get a certificate at the end of when you're finished. So that should count for your 3 hours, everybody, and it's free. Family Support Alliance does one, but it's either $10 if you do the virtual one or $75 if you go in and do it whenever you want. So I will let you know how it goes on Thursday. I'm hoping there's no glitches. I gave it a day, and I just can't do it tomorrow. I'm hoping that those first few people in there will find out any issues and they'll get it resolved. So, and that website, I can just email it to you, but it's www.reportabuspa.pitt.edu. So I can email that to you, but that's probably the simplest way to get people trained. I do our workshop every year. I don't give the continuing ed credits because although I was trained by Family Support Alliance, I condense the 3-hour training into an hour and a half, and then I usually have some other kind of speaker or something. So they allow me to do that, but then I can't give credits. So if I wanted to do the credits, I'd have to get the Department of Public Welfare to certify me, and then my workshop would end up being all day. So it's just, and I was doing it for free, and I wouldn't be able to do that anymore. So not quite sure what that's going to look like in the future. So I guess the thing to think about is, too, if you're a mandated reporter, you're a mandated reporter. And I know people, one of the big question was, is it only while I'm on the clock? Well, no, not really. If you are, and this is one of those changes, if you're at a football game and a child comes up to you, and that's one of the two things, if a child comes up to you and makes a disclosure of abuse, you must call that in. Or if someone comes up to you and says they abused a child, you must also call that in. So again, the state comes up with these things. How you're going to be able to do that, because I know I can go in my office and get on our database, and if that child happens to be in there, I'm going to have all that information that I need, like addresses, phone numbers, that type of thing. I don't know how you would do it. I mean, you could call it in, but you wouldn't have a lot of information for Childline, and you would probably have to wait until Monday, but the state's saying call it in. I will tell you that I have gotten, I had an abuse investigation once that they didn't know the address. They told me it was a busy road, and the house was on the bend of the road, and they gave me all this, the color of the house, and they thought it was this house number, but they weren't sure, and it was 3 kids that were playing in the middle of the road, and very busy street, and it was the bend of the road. And the concern was that they would get hit by a car. I had to go out and drive up and down that street till I found the house number did not exist on that road. So I went out, and I was just very lucky that night, because as I was slowing down at one bend in the road, and it was the right colored house, all came bouncing across, 3 kids came running across. It was the right gender. So when I talked to my supervisor, we were talking, and he said, yeah, this is probably the house, because we were familiar with the family also, so it made sense that it would be that family. So you don't always have to have all the information, but the more you have, the better it is for us. So again, I don't know how you're going to do that. The state just are making, that's what they're saying, how you're going to do something like that. But you also don't want to say to a kid, oh, don't tell me now, because I can't call it in, because I don't have, you can't do that, because if a child makes a disclosure to you, they're doing it because they trust you, and they really do want help. How you react when they do make a disclosure will affect the outcome of the investigation and whether or not we can help that child. You know, especially if it's sexual abuse, these kids are told all kinds of things, like no one will believe you, you know, the groomed and told a lot of things. So if you shut them off. They're gonna think, oh yeah, they said they, no one will believe me. You don't believe me, so okay, I'm not gonna talk about it. So I understand why the state's doing what they're doing. I just don't, they don't always think about how we're gonna do it. So that's just gonna be one of those things, I don't know how you do it. But that's what they're saying, you need to call it in. I guess you could call it in with what information you have and say, on Monday when I come back into school, I can get more information, but this is all I have right now. I just don't know. I'm really hoping that, I asked the people that train me if they were gonna have a refresher, and I don't know that they are. I think they're hoping we'll all take this online course. But I do have questions like that, and I have to figure out how I'm gonna address them too, because I know that especially schools are gonna ask me those kind of things. And even if you're like a scout leader or a church youth group leader, and you're not gonna have that information, so, I have to do the best we can with what we've got. Any questions? I would never, if you have concerns about a child, and I used to get calls saying, so should I call? I will never say, do not call this in. Because now one of the changes that they made also is, we get calls from Childline in 3 ways. We get the Child Protective Services, which are the abuse investigations. We get General Protective Services, which are situations that don't rise to the level of abuse or neglect, but we often intervene on behalf of the child and the family. Or we'll get a law enforcement report. So if you have concerns about a child, and when I talk about General Protective Service, I use the analogy of a puzzle. So when we get a child abuse investigation, we must see that child within 24 hours. We must assure their safety immediately. When we get General Protective Services report, it goes on, we look at the risk to the child. So if you don't have a lot of information, you may think, what is the point of calling? I don't know what the point is. The point is, you may have that one piece of information that we did not have prior to that. For example, if a neighbor calls in and says, oh, I'm just really worried about these neighbor kids, they're always running around, they seem hungry, and they just seem like they never get fed. And they're, 10 and 15. Okay, well, a 10 and 15-year-old, the vulnerability of a 10 and 15-year-old is a whole lot different than an infant or a 3-year-old. That may not be enough for us to go out on, because I cannot tell you how many times when I was doing General Protective Services, I would have kids call me to the school, had to see me. I go, what's going on? We have no food in the house. And I would look at them and say, so, I'm going to come to your house after school, and I'm going to check the cupboard. So is there really no food in the house, or is there no junk food in the house? And a lot of times it was no junk food in the house. If there was no food, I would help them find food pantries. I would look at the resources that we have in the county to help them. It's really tough right now if you're trying to pay rent and heat and groceries, and your kids are growing out of clothes like left and right because they do that. So part of my job is to look at what resources we have in the county, and I know who has coat banks, I know who has shoe banks, I know where the food banks are, so that when case workers come to me, I can say, well, have you tried this, have you tried that? And then I have a few in my little bag of tricks that I don't tell them who they are, but I have a couple that I can access when I need on an emergency basis to help those families. Because that's not really abuse. If you're working minimum wage and you just can't afford all that, I don't know. The last time I bought fuel oil, which was about 6 years ago, my budget payment was $450 a month. We had 2 incomes, and I struggled to make a $450. It was, on top of a house payment. And then I had kids in high school, and, so I get that. I get that. That's not abuse. That's just the reality of living in Center County. So, back to the rest of the kids. So then maybe you call in, or the nurse calls in and says, I'm really worried about Johnny because he's a diabetic and he just really seemed off today. Now, we already had that call from the neighbor saying these kids always seem hungry. Wasn't the risk to that, there wasn't a whole lot of risk there. But all of a sudden, we have a child that's a diabetic, and he seemed off today. So now we're saying, we need to go out because we don't know, maybe they don't have food, maybe he's not getting his insulin. We need to check and make sure that he's getting that his needs are being met. You know, again, if it's because they can't afford the insulin, we'll help them figure out a way. You know, or if it's they just ran out of food, we'll help them get food. I mean, I've gone and bought people jars of peanut butter, bread, and milk to get them through, you know, for a couple days till their next check came. So I will never say don't call in a concern. You just need to understand that sometimes it may be that extra piece, and sometimes it may be that one. And I will tell you that Sharon has been in our office for, I think it's 19 years, long time, 17 or 19 years. And every once in a while I'll hear her say, that's it, that's the piece we needed. And that's because someone called in with that one additional piece of information that made that risk go up. And, you know, because when we go out, we're pretty intrusive. People are not happy to see us come to the door. So we can't just go out on, we go out on blood, but we can't, you know, there's no risk, or the risk seems, you know, we have to have enough to go out. Because we're not going to just knock on the door and say, so do you have food? Because we hear you don't have food. I mean, we're going in, we're doing an assessment, we're looking at what's going on. So I will never tell you not to call something. And you can now, starting December 31st, you can make those calls to Childline also. Yes?
What if we know that CYS is already involved? Should we still call it?
Absolutely, because, you know, people don't always tell us everything. They try to hide stuff from us. So, you know, sometimes we may just not know because they can get pretty, so the kids are told not to tell us anything because they're going to rip them out of their home. So, you know, like I said, I did not surprise me when kids said, oh, I'm not allowed to talk to you. You're going to take me from my parents. Okay, well, no, that's not my job, honey, but okay. You know, our job is to keep them in the home whenever we can, which I get. People don't always understand that, and they get frustrated because a dirty home is a dirty home. But what you consider dirty and what the state considers dirty are way different, way different. The state's looking at fire, health, and safety hazards. So it can be dirty, and it can have that dirty home smell, but if you can walk through and, you know, to clear paths and there's no health or safety hazards, the state's saying that's okay. Oh, that's a health hazard. Yeah, that's a health hazard. Oh, yeah, that's not good. No, we would be, yeah, no, that's a health hazard. I mean, we look at everything we can do to help them. Because, you know, we have some landlords that don't make repairs that they need to make. That's not the parent's fault. Again, that goes back to what you can afford. So if they sign that release, we will talk to the landlord and say, hey, you know, we've got little kids here, and especially if they're, you know, yeah, I took kids out of a home because of the little one that chicken bones and coins on the floor. He was little, running around. And I said, the house was a mess. And I said, they can't stay here at night, so they're going to have to leave. And we took, the parents signed a voluntary placement agreement. When we had kids in here for like 2 weeks till they cleaned their house up. And I said to her, I'll come up Friday, tell you what you need to fix yet. And if everything's fixed on Monday when I come up after lunch, I'll start picking up your kids, and they'll all be home by the time school's out. Because she had several, and I couldn't, you know, we can't put, unfortunately, if it's a family of even two sometimes, we can't find foster homes for sibling groups. So it's hard. So I had to put those kids in 3 different homes. But she cleaned it up, and when I went up on Friday, there were like 4 things that needed to be done. I said, these are what you need to fix. I'll be up Monday at 1. I went on Monday, everything was fixed, so I went and collected her kids and brought them back home. Is that house what you would want to live in? Probably not. But for the state, it's okay. And I had a case where I had it so long that I would have other caseworkers go with me once in a while, because I said, I just need to know that I'm not, like, I'm so used to seeing it a certain way, I need to know that I'm not missing something. Just because, you know, you get used to seeing something. And so, there are, you will have the ability, and I really looked today while I was in the office, and they obviously don't have it up yet either, but you will have the ability to go online and make your reports to Childline. out yet how to do it because they haven't, I guess they'll have it up on December 31st when that, or December 30th when that is effective. If you call it in, you must still do the written report then. But if you're doing the online report, that's your written report. So it would save you a step if you went online, but you still absolutely can call. Trying to see. If you willful failure report is punishable, you can receive a fine and you can be incarcerated. And they are, they do look. If something happens, I will tell you, if something happens to a child, one of the first things they're going to do is look, has anybody ever called child like that, this child? And if not, they're going to be wondering why. Whenever there's a child death, and we haven't had any in Center County, they do an extensive investigation about how things have happened without people knowing anything about it. We lost, there were 38 children died in Pennsylvania last year. Most of them were under the age of 4. For the 5 years prior to that, it went back and forth between 33 and 34 kids every year. So we're losing the equivalent of a kindergarten class every year to abuse and neglect. Again, when people say why, I don't think this is, I don't understand why I have to make these calls. That's why. We're losing a kindergarten class of kids every year. And we haven't been able to change that statistic. I was hopeful. I kept saying for the past 5 years, I just kept saying it's going up, down, 33, 34. And then when I got the stats for 2014, it went up to 38. And I'm like, oh, that's worse. We're now, so we're, with all these changes, it's still not getting better. And you guys see these kids, they're with you most of the day. They trust you. They're going to make those disclosures to you. So, any other questions? Like I said, the big thing is, if you suspect it, you must call it in, or on December 31st, you can do the written report. You got to give your name. Giving your name proves you made that call. Remember I said they'll check to see if the child, they'll prove you made the call. We can't give out referral sources. Like, we're bound by confidentiality, so we cannot give out referral sources. They do try to guess, and I've had them say, oh, I know it was a school. And I said, do you? And I would usually try to reflect, like, you know how many people could have called in? How many people have seen your child today or yesterday? Do you know how many people could have called this in? It could be anybody, or any of your relatives mad at you. It could have been one of them. It could be anybody. But we can't give up that referral source. I was subpoenaed by Clinton County once, and they asked me to name their referral source, and I had indicated abuse in Center County, and they wanted to know who the referral source was because the perpetrator said, I know it was my old girlfriend, and I was sitting on the stand thinking, no, it wasn't, but I can't tell you that. And of course the attorneys were arguing about whether or not I could tell. The judge ordered me to tell. And I don't know, once in a while, things just fall into place. And I said it was the guidance counselor at the school where the child attended. Now, they had no idea where this kid went to school because she was living in Center County now. I didn't give a name. I really was shocked that the judge didn't slap me with some kind of something. But he did. He let it go because they really thought it was the girlfriend and it wasn't. But I couldn't tell them that. And I danced around it as best I could without giving up a name. So. And I know that you guys get frustrated because we can't tell you what's happening in the homes. Unless we have a written release, we can't tell you. Now, if you're making a report of abuse, and it comes in as an abuse investigation, you are entitled to know the outcome of the report, and the state will now, I believe, start sending that to mandated reporters starting the 31st. So you'll get, we usually send a letter, we're supposed to send a letter saying, whether the outcome of the report and whether or not we provided services. The state will start doing that. So you'll know. But unless these parents sign a release for the State College School District, I can't tell you anything. And my release says if they would sign one for that abuse investigation, it's only good as long as I'm doing that investigation. As soon as I finalize my report, that release is done. So, and even if on General Protective Services, if I always got them to sign releases before they got mad at me, so I had releases for everybody I could think of that I would want to talk to with this family. it's only good as long as I'm open. So if they, I would close a case on Friday, and you would want to call me on Monday and talk about something, I could, because I closed the case. So I get that that's frustrating, and we can't give you like a blow detail of everything. We can really only give you the pertinent facts that apply to you. You tell us anything, we will gladly take any information on any child, because like I said, it may be that one piece that we didn't know and that we really need. So, I think you went into teaching because you care about kids. So for me, it's a no-brainer that you're just going to make the calls. I do. My kids hate to go out to dinner with me or to the grocery store with me because my daughters really learned to figure out my body language. And, people say and do stupid things in restaurants. And I get a little tense when they say, I'm just going to leave you here. And I just kind of tense up. My daughter, you can see her going, so we've kind of stopped eating out a lot because I just don't want to. Or I go to, she lives in another county, and she's like, you're not in your county anymore. And I said, I'm still a mandated reporter. Again, if a child, and I know people, it used to be the child had to be affiliated with you. But if a child comes to you and talks about their cousin, and they give you identifying information about that cousin, you need to report that now, starting December 31st. So again, it's the whole it takes a village. I think the state's taking that approach. It takes a village to raise kids. So any other questions? Yes?
Can you give us the number for Childline?
Oh, wow. 800. This is awful. I haven't called them for so long. 800 9. You know what? I'm going to have to Google it. I think it's 9330.
7462. It's on the website.
Is it? Okay.
692-7462.
Oh, that changed since when okay.
That's the contact us line anyway.
Oh, no, that's not on Childline? No. It should be a
1-800-932-0313. It's the Pennsylvania Department of Public Welfare.
Yeah.
1-800-932-0313.
Yeah, it's been 5 years since I've called them, so I just don't remember. I have it on my PowerPoint, but obviously I didn't bring that today. Any other questions? Like I said, they should have the ability December 31st to do the reports online. I looked on the Department of Public Welfare site today, and it gives you the Childline number, and that's it. But I'm guessing closer to December 31st, they'll have that link where you can because right now Childline's calling us, and what's going to happen is we're going to start getting in our database, it's going to start coming in from Childline directly, so that we're not getting phone calls anymore. So it'll be great as long as computers work. Yes. Well, unless they come to some kind of training or take that training online now, they're not going to know. So I think that's, as administrators, that's just, I think probably the easiest way to get everyone to know what's going on is to take that 3-hour training. Like I said, it's free, so it's not going to be a burden for the school district to, foster parents are now mandated. They always have been, but it's just they've really, really broadened the scope of who a mandated reporter is, so that pretty much anybody that has any contact with children assumes any responsibility for the care of children in any capacity. You and mandated reporters. So that's the edited version. But I think that hits pretty much the highlights for you. As far as you guys, it's not a lot of changes. Children, so bear with us, because I will tell you that any abuse investigations that we get from now until December 30th, we are using the old regs and the old process. Starting December 31st, we have to use the new one. So If you would happen to call something in prior to December 31st, and then you call something in December 31st or after that, we could be handling it 2 different ways. So it is what it is. We just have to go with it. So.
All right, let's thank Mary Ann for joining us tonight. In terms of the process, we as a district will be obviously looking at how to get people trained. So that would be coming out from Gene Canals' office in the near future, because like Mary Ann said, a lot is just continuing to evolve and be out there. So that piece will be, we'll all know about that piece soon. So, and the other piece of that as well, everybody, in terms of a plan for this building, the counselors and I have talked about that. And if there is a situation where you do need to make a report, you can contact the main office. We can get you coverage, and the counselors would be happy, like they said, to be there with you because they've obviously been through the process of making reports before, so they can help you through it and guide you through the process of what to expect and what to anticipate while we get you coverage as well. So, don't fret about that piece. We have a plan in place to help get coverage and the reporting piece.
I would say if you have not seen a CY 47, that's the form that we used to fill out, and you still will, I guess, unless you do it online. That asks a lot of the questions that they're going to be, it has a lot of the questions they're going to ask you. There's going to be things you will not know. They're going to ask you things like, are there guns in the home? Well, you may not know. It's okay to say, I don't know. You don't feel bad if you don't know. You just do the best you can. And it's really okay to say, I don't know, when you're answering the questions. It is what it is. We have protocol in place so that if there's any concerns about our safety, we call the police and they go with us. So, thank you.
Okay, quickly moving on. November 26th is next week, I believe. Is that next week? That's the upcoming in-service. So to give you a little brief overview before we send out the details of what the day will look like specifically in terms of time. The morning piece will be at Park Forest Middle School for us. Mount Nittany will be at their school for the morning piece, and we'll be working on Roar in the morning. And then in the afternoon, it's our turn this year to travel to Mount Nittany, since they came over here last year. So in the afternoon, we'll be traveling to Mount Nittany, and we've heard from several folks that they just feel like they need time to collaborate with their counterparts at Mount Nittany Middle School. So the coordinators have agreed to be part of facilitating conversations with your compadres at Mount Nittany Middle School, and we're going to spend the afternoon. If you have things to share about curriculum changes, there are several groups in this room that have had shifts or changes in curriculum and things that are coming down the pike for changes in your curriculum, SLOs, different things you're working on in terms of new approaches. So we felt that it's best to give that time, because one of those things we're always looking for is time to collaborate, which we have with our department time, but we don't have that luxury of meeting with the other side of town. So that afternoon is going to be devoted to working with your counterparts, and the coordinators will be helping to facilitate that part. I will send an email out with details so you know exactly what time. So the morning here, afternoon, Mount Nittany Middle School. Quick update, the Master Schedule Committee. Can you stand if you're on the Master Schedule Committee, please, so people know who you are? Okay. So take a look at folks in case you have questions. We met yesterday with Mount Nittany, and again, just to review, we do have about 20 members on a cross-building committee that are working toward looking at where we're headed next year, be it continuing with our 9-period day or looking at the hybrid block that we discussed. We did review the initial data from the staff. Unfortunately, we only had about 97 responses from a combination of both middle schools, which is a relatively low return rate. We were hoping to have a lot more, considering we have about 93 teachers here and about the same at Mount Nittany. We were hoping to get a lot more feedback. But nonetheless, what we saw in the feedback that we do have so far, there was only about a 4% difference thus far in terms of leaning toward a hybrid block versus the 9-period day. We haven't looked at the student data yet. That'll be our next Master Scheduling Committee meeting when we review the student data. So we just wanted to kind of give you an update. And anyone from the committee want to share anything else that you want to highlight at this point, or do we want to wait until we look at student data before we point out? So essentially, if you have any questions, this is a very transparent process. So anybody you saw, Stan, me, Larry, anybody, ask questions if you have questions about where we're headed. At this point, it's pretty nebulous. We're looking at the data, and like I said, it's pretty close. So we're hoping to have more responses to have a little bit more clarity, but we're kind of in that spot right now where it's pretty close. So as things develop, as the committee meets, we'll of course keep you apprised so you know where things are headed with that. We do have block scheduling books in the main office in case you have a lot of leisure time and want to read about block scheduling. In the event you need more information on that. And finally, getting to, if you remember last month's Department Time session was on looking at parental involvement, which is critical, especially at middle level when parents seem to disappear. And we know that from PTSO meetings where we normally have about one parent that shows up. And we know that from, sometimes our conferences are well attended, sometimes not. Sometimes the parents who want to get involved do, sometimes they don't. So what we'd like to do for the next 5 minutes is find somebody with the same hair color, and we're going to take about 2 minutes to share, and then I'm going to break you up in another way to share out again. So next 2 minutes, highlight the 3 big things that you do that might be unique or different that you talked about in your departments or from your teams that you use to gauge parents or bring them in or involve them or to make them aware of their child's progress. So same color of hair, 2 minutes. Go ahead.